but on Andrew, he may go a bit longer because you don't have his bio. I'll start with myself, Parker Cassidy. I'm currently serve as an executive in residence with RA Capital. And RA Capital is a venture fund, 80% public, 20% private, focused exclusively on life sciences. My role there is I focus on diagnostic opportunities, but ultimately I'll be moving back into an operating role on raising my hand out there in the audience.
Great. So I'm not Charlie, I'm Andrew, and so I'm with Illumina. For those who don't know Illumina, I represent come from the corporate perspective, so corporate venture capital. So Illumina is a public company in the genomic space. For those familiar with personalized medicine, $1,000 genome, we're sort of pushing that forward and driving that, have instruments for DNA sequencing and consumables that go with that. So as part of our group and corporate development group, we invest off the balance sheet selectively in companies within our ecosystem, and that's generally on the earlier stage, Series A, Series B side, although sometimes we've done later stage, and 1 to 5 million. We've done more, and we've done slightly less in some investments as well. It's always within our ecosystem, and so it's strategic. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. So pass it over. Summers. Sorry.
Yeah, hi, Bob Williams, Bronco Diagnostics. We are a Milan-based pharma company, primarily in radiology, diagnostic, a lot of the imaging agents, contrast agents. We also have some medical device divisions. I'm responsible for North American business development innovation, bringing in a lot of the opportunities to the company. We are primarily strategic, so we do look for accretive opportunities. Typically, most of our acquisitions were what I would say, market stage, a couple years into the market. Now we're getting a little bit earlier on in the process as the market consolidates. Need to find good ideas sooner in the development cycle than we typically have done in the past, and to review the shows and talk to the attendees.
So I'm John Stewart. I'm with Prologue Ventures, and I promised Parker I was going to be super controversial when I came here. So Natera is the best NIPT company that RA did not invest in. He invested in a bunch of, so that's me.
I'm Joe Cunningham. Those of you that were in my earlier panel, you'll hear the same jokes. Sante Ventures, we're an early stage venture capital firm out of Texas. We do sort of everything in healthcare. We do biotech, medical device, service, and IT. So across the spectrum, we've got $300 million under management. And we do seed and Series A investments, typical sweet spots, $5 to $7 million investment, expecting to invest 10 to 12 over the life of the company. We're company builders, not deal guys, so we get in and they're there throughout the life.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. So this is the one panel of the day that's really focused on diagnostics. So the first question that we've discussed as a panel I wanted to put to the panel here is, what makes the diagnostic investment area a bit different? What makes it unique? What are some of the things that you'll hear in this panel that you might not hear in some of the other ones? All right, John.
I can start.
Yes.
I think from a venture perspective, diagnostic companies are ones where you can get the product a lot faster. And so from an investor's perspective, it's really great if, particularly in the CLIA lab model, you can very quickly get from development to product on the market. What I think is an unfortunate bad rap on diagnostics is that we really make a bigger difference, because if we can capture disease before it gets bad and before you take expensive therapeutic interventions, you can make a big difference. And I'll put a stake in the ground. The biggest thing that's going to happen in the next 5 years is going to be early detection of cancer through looking at cell-free DNA in blood. And thanks to these guys' equipment, we're going to be able to do that for cancer recurrence monitoring, and I think for picking up really hard to detect cancers, say pancreatic cancer or liver cancer or brain cancer at stage 1, 2 level and be able to treat it. And that's going to be, I think, the biggest thing when we look back 10 years from now that happened in medical technology.
If you can treat it, but that's not completely
So,
said thing.
yeah, but 50, there are more than 50 cancer oncology agents right now, which are indicated for very specific mutations, right? So everything from Erbitux to Avastin are, highly targeted drugs which are indiscriminately applied because standard of care sucks.
That's right. And,
Right.
and that may all work out fine, but first off, you got to get the incentives aligned, and there's sure a lot of folks that don't want them to be, and they like indiscriminate use from the pharma side.
I know.
And then there's a lot of these cancers that we absolutely don't know if finding your pancreatic cancer earlier is going to make a difference or not. I always use the analogy of here's where you get prostate cancer, and you're going to die of prostate cancer. And through early diagnosis, you can enjoy knowing you have prostate cancer for a long time. But that hasn't actually changed when you die in and of itself. So my only point being that these are all way more complicated. And to me, one of the hard parts about diagnostics is you want to invest in huge pain points that are it's clear that's a major pain point. And because it's hard whether it's a big problem or a little problem. And so if you're going to work that hard, you want something that's going to change everything, make a difference. And I think it's been harder to find those things historically in diagnostics. We all have this hope for we finally peeled back enough layers of the onion that we've got stuff that's going to matter and it's going to work. But I think when you get all the way from the scientists to the guys that are writing the bills, CMS and the payers, I think there's a lot of heavy lifting that's got to be done, and I think that's been a big part of what's gone on in the diagnostic world is that part of the ocean.
The only thing that I would say is, as a person in a company who does a lot of the heavy lifting, the regulatory and reimbursement efforts are increasing. They don't seem to be subsiding that much, and I think if you're going to be in this business, expect it. You have to do it.
But cost of capital for a venture firm, that's a heavy load.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say that's why I don't say we don't do diagnostics, we have,
Yep.
but it's a heavy load.
Yeah. So I agree with both John and Joe. I think there's going to be sort of an explosion in testing and oncology and a lot of opportunity there. I think the question then is how can it be actionable? And so that's a big step. And then to get to Parker's question where the difference is, well, I think the key one is around the reimbursement side. And just doing that, the required investment to get the trials and the economic studies for these tests, whether it's lab developed test or to the IVD, to get reimbursed in an appropriate way to make it sense from an investment perspective. Value-based pricing, are we going to get there? That's
Hey, can we pick on BRCA since Illumina does strategic acquisitions where they pay a premium to get something that's good, and you said you want to do accretive acquisitions. I want strategic acquisitions where you pay a big premium. Do you ever do that?
The general rule of thumb is being a strategic, you tend to overpay. And usually
That's what we want.
After you close a deal and you open up the hood of the company, sometimes it's, you're in remediation and integration mode, and that's sort of a little bit of life. It depends what's being sold and if it's competitive or not. If you're bidding against other people, yeah, things get bid up. If when two big players in a space are looking to acquire technology, sure, you get the premium. But there's deals out there where there are fire sales, and you're not going to get a premium for that.
So I would argue that the greatest acquisition made, or one of the greatest, was when Illumina bought pyrosequencing from Jay West and paid $580 million for a company that, well, it must have been 100 or 1,000 times revenue or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's the core of, you know, a how many billion-dollar monopoly right now.
So, John, you said diagnostics get a bad rap, sometimes unfairly, maybe sometimes fairly. Can you talk about that, the source of that bad rap? You know, I think reimbursement was brought up.
Yeah, you know, so the thing that's really interesting to me is that you have these studies going on out of Washington where they just, whether it's PSA testing, or whether it's mammography, or
Yep.
whether it's the colonoscopies, they want to change that from, you know, 5 years to 10 years. Every major modality of diagnostic care is under fire, and I don't know why. You know, it's it's a couple of percent of healthcare spending. You know, the last year of life is 57% of healthcare spend, and we should let them die. That's where the money is spent. And I've been spending a bunch of time right now in pediatric disorders. So depending on your count, there's, you know, something like 500,000 children in this country that have a rare genetic disorder where there's an orphan drug which will cure them, and there's a disconnect between the kid and the drug because we can't find them because there's no good testing modalities. And it is criminal that we don't do something about it. Criminal. End of sermon.
So, problem is that all care that's given is not benign. And so it's not just a matter of, we'll get the mammogram and you find the early breast cancer and all those that were false positives, nothing bad happens. There's lots of bad stuff that happens with that. There's lots of money spent on bad stuff with that. And you can take all the blood out of a newborn, doing all those rare orphan diseases. You've got to have some more focus than that from a public policy perspective.
Yeah, but it's technology. So I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but I was just visiting a great company, so I'll give them a free advertisement. The company called Parabase right here in Boston, and they take, you know, a tiny spot of blood. It's a RESI company, so just a tiny spot of blood. They can do 280 the genetic diseases, and they just need money to commercialize it.
So it's a long,
If
slow job.
you want to join me, you know, I'm ready to do a Series 8 with these guys. It's a good
It's a long,
company.
slow job, and again, that's why we're all in the room, is we're interested in doing these things. I just feel like you need to understand
You're right.
how hard this is
It's
to
hard.
do that. It's not as easy. And one part of that is you've got to completely understand and follow the money and follow who owns the patient and follow who's getting the benefit and follow who's paying for that benefit. These are things all you guys know, but it's just complicated. Otherwise, we'd just all say diagnostics are great. But I don't know about y'all, but when you go out and fundraise for pension fund guys that you know can't spell medical, they don't know about all that. What they know is, I lost a lot of money investing in diagnostics. Tell me before I tell you if I'm going to invest in you, you're going to be doing a lot of diagnostics. And if you say yes, you may not raise funds. So again, that's just being realistic about it.
Yeah. Diagnostics, yeah, I agree. It has a lot of the venture risk in it. You still have developing assays is not easy. It takes time. You have commercial risk, regulatory reimbursement. So it has all the risks that you stack up and a
so
lot of investment to
big
get
bad
there.
monopolists can raise prices on you when when you start selling it, right?
And so when you get to the exits,
Sorry.
Yeah, returns can be challenging as well. So it can get a bad rap. There's been some spectacular outcomes, but by and large, it can be challenging.
My comment a little bit in listening to the conversation again is, I call it the push versus the pull. I think early stage investors like to push. In other words, put the teams together, put the money in place and push up. And I think to a certain extent those teams are capable of getting in front of CMS, getting their regulatory approvals. and the FDA, CMS for regulatory and reimbursement approval. Just because you get it doesn't mean the docs are going to pull or the clinicians are going to pull. I've worked in virtual colonoscopy as an alternate to optical colonoscopy since its inception, and I worked for companies that organically did it. We did a lot of in-licensing, and probably we have spent well more in funding trying to cultivate key opinion leaders to pull it than we did in the actual development of the technology. But I can speak from the rad space. I'm not a biochemist or a geneticist. The docs just don't want to pull it. They have a good book of business with their standard body imaging, but yet here's a screening modality. Again, it's not being pulled. Similarly, CMS and just gave the green light for lung screening via CT. These are not typically the studies docs like to read. They're like basically diminishing them down at kind of like the mammography level. So I think you really have to look at who your market is with a diagnostic and how to get the pull. Because if the key opinion leaders pull, and if you get the medical societies on board, namely the colleges of medicine on board, and you see a lot with that now coming in the way of the automation, the clinical decision support, the way patients are managed, you're golden. If you can't fall within that paradigm, no matter how much you spend and no matter how good you are, and some of it can be great stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to buy it.
So how good are diagnostic companies that are coming through? How good are they at articulating the value of their test, who that value is going to be for, and understanding, some of those dynamics about what will drive adoption?
So I'll pick on two examples. I'll take an old one and a new one. So the Genomic Health, I think, was the poster child for a diagnostic company that built an assay, went out and got a huge amount of clinical evidence, and so that they even though they didn't have to get an FDA approval, they did all of these studies with KOLs, and so they had a really big dossier, and by the time they went to CMS, they had the pharmacoeconomic study to prove that they were worth $3,500 a test.
Yep.
And so of a diagnostic company that De Novo did it, I think they did it the best.
Yep.
And I think Foundation Medicine it would be the equivalent of a company of this generation, which has gone out and done the same thing.
Really?
I mean,
Okay.
Foundation has just been brilliant, don't you think?
What they did do, I think, right, and what John, you talked about, Bob alluded to, was in addition to doing all those studies, getting all the KOLs on board,
Yeah.
and getting all those endorsements. I think for the entrepreneurs in the audience, that
Yeah.
makes a big difference when it comes time to launch commercially.
Yep. Launch, guidelines, reimbursement, adoption, and a lot of times in that order. So I'm curious, Exact took a different approach to that, right? But you highlighted there two successes, right? Genomic Health, Foundation Medicine, coming at it from different ways, right? A business model, maybe on the Foundation side, where it's funded by biopharma, and so there are multiple paths there. And I think that, in my mind, Genomic Health has kind of paved the way for the next novel test. How do you prove the impact? How do you get reimbursement? How do you present that to an investor and
is
say,
following the Genomic Health model, right?
yeah, and maybe accelerating it,
Yeah.
compressing that timeline between approval and launch.
So
Can I ask some of the other panelists to also chime in on maybe what are some of the defining elements, or what are some examples of entities that kind of stand out, right? Because we talked about the vagaries of adoption, reimbursement, but there's all this upside, John, that you alluded to, of potential to impact disease in a profound way. So what are some of the ones that come through and they're effective at?
So what we're looking for, it's all the kinds of things we've been talking about. I want to know, what's the pain point? What are you trying to solve? And that means is it going to affect behavior? Is it an actionable bit of information that you get? I want to know who owns that customer, who owns that patient, and is this something that's beneficial to them, or is this something that isn't beneficial to that doctor? because that's your push-pull. Are they going to make more money or are they going to make less money? I want to know the regulatory pathway and the reimbursement pathway. And again, for the payer, is this something that's going to take money out of the system, cost out of the system, or is it going to drive cost? And I understand when I'm talking about the doctor is making money or not, and I talk about the payers. You talk about patient care and patient outcomes, and is it good? I'm just being realistic. If that payer thinks this is going to open a whole bunch of more people up to confirmatory procedures that I've got to pay for, that's a mountain to climb over. So you've got to really think about how the impact in the marketplace and the healthcare delivery system is going to be viewed. And so when the startups come and see me, often they have not thought through these things, and they want to start and finish on how it can provide better patient outcomes. And I wish that I lived in a world where that was the only thing that matters, but that's not the world I live in. And you've got to follow the money, you've got to follow the patient, you've got to follow the incentives. And you know, it's easy in these kind of things to talk in generalities, but this concept of, are you really affecting outcome by earlier diagnosis is one everybody says, but there are far fewer instances where that's been proven than there are where it's been said but not proven. And to get it paid for, I think you've got to have evidence showing that. And even if it seems inherently obvious, you've got to pay for the study to show that in order to get it paid for. So that's the kind of thing, that's the way that I approach it anyway, is looking through all those steps.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be investing in a new screening test is what I'm hearing out of that, right? Because that's an incredibly high bar to prove. Yeah. I mean, if you know, John, you cited the 5-year survival rates around pancreatic cancer for late stage, right? There's 5-year survival rates for early stage of 27%, right? 15 times, 14 times better than stage 4. Are you just living with it longer, or are there truly more people who live because of the intervention? I think inherently in the medical community, there's a belief that people are living longer because of the intervention. And I think you gotta, you know, for anybody who's gonna reasonably invest in something that might affect screening, you're gonna have to buy into that premise that people are gonna buy it along the way. People are gonna buy do mammograms for years. People are gonna do PSA for years, until that question is really answered definitively.
So Parker,
right?
here's the thought experiment. We're in a world where 2020, the baby boom generation is all retiring, and they're getting old and they're getting sick. And we do not have the resources in this country with political willpower to increase tax rates to 70%, or what it would take to, you know, cover
the current
people.
Yep.
So what's going to happen, I think, absolutely, is we're going to screen who gets care. We're going to ration care. And one way is money. That's not politically very popular. And the other way is to have some sort of diagnostic testing routine to triage and screen care. And so I actually think the tape is moving in our favor. Most people don't see it, but I think the tape is moving in the favor of diagnostic care into how do we figure out the right front door to medicine. And that's what I think this room represents. And I think we're the way for the future.
Can I ask Bob?
I was just going to say is, you know, the one thing that I would maybe kind of ask entrepreneurs, I mean, or people looking to develop in the diagnostic space, is coming out with this blood test is going to replace legacy. Not only do you have the push and pulls from the clinicians themselves, you also have the infrastructures. The Roches, the Bayers, these companies in the world, they exert enormous forces, and you know, and have their own ways of limiting entry, and sometimes very successfully. The one thing that I would probably maybe look at is some taking existing technologies and looking at companion diagnostics. I mean, in the radiology space, we're looking, you know, there's a little bit of a buzz starting with the radiogenomics, basically imaging markers, imaging phenotypes that are used as adjuncts to genetic testing, immunotherapies, and these kinds of things. So, you know, there's a lot of room for creativity that's sort of it may not be the big grand market, but there's certainly markets and needs out there, and I think there are viable businesses and problems to be solved out there.
Hi, I'm Joanne Gear. I'm the Executive Director of the Biopharma Research Council. And we represent scientists and entrepreneurs as just a nonprofit association. And the question I always ask is, would you talk about where is your front door? Where is the best approach in each of your groups for getting started in the conversation?
Sure. And so depending on what door you want to enter, there's different entry points, but we can all point each other in the right direction. So it would be just coming directly to myself or my colleagues in corporate development on the venture side, and likewise for the accelerator, doors are open and welcome for those conversations as well. That's a genomics-focused accelerator, and again, for our investments, that's driven very specific, more narrowly than the traditional investment group towards genomics and our ecosystem on what's going to be enabling for our markets, applications, and our customers, however you might define those, whether it's labs or patients, providers, payers, pharma.
My door is always open, so I'll speak to anybody, but I think to keep the conversation going, once you reach a certain threshold, you need to come prepared, and you need to probably come with friends, either good clinical advisors, key opinion leaders and stuff. Those are the things that keep the door open or keep you on the other side of the door.
So for me, with the venture firms I've been with, it's really, there are three doors. The best one is, you know somebody who is in my trusted network and they say, John, look at this. And that gets moved to the front of my desk. And the best place for most entrepreneurs that don't know a lot of venture firms, it's the lawyers. Because if you think about it, you're corporate attorneys and go to somebody who's got big market share, like a Wilson Sonsini or a Cooley Goddard. They basically have a deal where they say, we're going to give you the first $25,000 in legal services for free. And so they're really your first investor. And their job with that $25,000 is to get you incorporated and try to get you some protection around your IP if you have some, and then introduce you to people like me. And they've got a long list of people that they try to then sort for where are you going to spend your time best to have somebody who's likely to be able to help you now or later. The other thing is an event like this. So all of us come to lots and lots of places where there are a lot of entrepreneurs, and we're open to listen to ideas, and I try to tell people really quickly, this doesn't fit, or it might fit, or something, and if I can't help you, I want to try to point you in a direction of somebody who can, because I don't have a business if I don't have entrepreneurs, right? You guys are the heroes, the guys who write the checks, we're just money, right? Money and nice guys.
I'd agree with a lot of what John said. It comes no shock to you that it's not necessarily fair either. I look at 1,500 things a year, and I can't tell you that I look at all of them with the same, It's why you do want to have, if you can get an introduction, that's important, because then I'm going to go, well, I might embarrass myself if I don't really read this. Another thing that happens is that somebody's trying to be a good entrepreneur and follow through, so they'll send me something, and then, a week later they'll write and say, I hadn't heard back from you, what's going on? Well, I may have been in Asia for that week, and if you keep pushing, I'll just say no and go on. And so you want to put pressure up, because it can get lost. We have a process. We try to have a process where they don't just fall off the table completely. But I'm not saying don't push, but don't call the question unless you're ready to call the question, because of just that timing. And then the last thing I'd say, the most important thing I would say, is be able to tell a good story. Because for any of us, you're going to have a few minutes to capture my attention, to make me see the vision, to make me feel like you understand what you're doing, and that I want to go on that journey with you. And obviously, there's a lot of deep due diligence before you get all the way to the journey. But I know if I'm not interested within 5 minutes. And so you need to practice that story. When we go out to fundraise, my two partners and I, three of us, we put together our deck, and I've got an office full of McKinsey guys, so we put on really pretty PowerPoints. And then we practice that presentation that we're going to give together over and over and over again. And then we pick the guys that there's no way ever that they're going to invest in us, and we go see them, and we pitch to them, and they're nasty to you, and they ask questions and don't like you from the time you walk in. That's great, do that. And so after we've done 50 of those or so, then we get the list of people that are going to invest in us, so we go pitch to them. So just think about it. People don't put enough effort into telling the story, and telling the story is the most important thing that an entrepreneur CEO does. He's inspiring a vision, he's telling a story so he can fundraise, so he can get people to come with him, and so he can have a vision that people will follow.
So, useful tips on this. The number one is, please look at the website of the person you're going to knock on the door of. So, I can't tell you how many times I'm invested in a competing company and the entrepreneur sends me his business plan. I don't want to see your business plan if you're competing with somebody I'm already invested in. It's not a good thing. So, please do that. The other thing to the story idea is there are a lot of resources that they call pitch labs, usually associated with universities and incubators, and you can go and you can do this practice, and it's free, and get feedback, and it's enormously helpful. Because what tends to happen is not that you don't have a good story, it's that you don't lead with the right things first. You get too excited about telling the history or telling the technology, and we're looking for the bullet points of why does this matter, why does it affect me, and so on. And so practice.
Hi, Stephanie Maris from CSS, the Entrepreneurship Center. Question is, in therapeutics deal, every investor wants to see a potential of $500 to $1 billion. What's it look like in the Diagnostics deal? Does that number still hold, or do you guys looking at smaller numbers because it's smaller numbers?
Yeah, so we're always looking for large, it's not necessarily, it has to be those numbers specifically, but large market opportunities that would justify the investment. And so we'll often see opportunities where it's just hard to pencil out. It may be a very, very niche diagnostic field and area where you just can't justify an investment for us. But for us to accelerate, again, strategically, from a corporate investment perspective, new markets and new applications, we probably do have a lower hurdle there as well from other financial investors just because of that.
From a strategic side, the only thing I'll add is we never look at the multiple as a buyer. I mean, what we look at is basically what a company is doing now, and if we can understand the market, what the market potential is worth, typically 5 years in a terminal value, and then we'll base our valuations on that. Versus, we're in it for the long haul.
So I think that multiple of capital is the wrong metric for venture. It's really the impact on your fund. And so we're looking, so people say, oh, you own a 10X. If I've got the chance to put $1 million in a company and guarantee that I'll get 10 times my money in 6 months, that's not something I'm going to be interested in. Personally, I might make that investment, but not from the fund standpoint, because it doesn't have any impact on the fund. So we're always looking to do impact deals that, if it's successful, can return the entire fund. And so I think that's just a useful thing for you to know when you're looking at your multiples and your revenue. From a market size, I do think, for the reasons that they outlined, because we're interested in exits, we want big markets. So I think 300 is very, very floor of the market size you'd look at. 500 to $1 billion. Of course, everybody comes in with everything, says they're $1 billion market, but I think that 300 would be the very, very floor for market size to be interesting.
I use Natera as a case study because it's a really good one. And the first thought on Natera is that the company originally started in IVF, which is a very small market. So they wanted to do a better PGD, and we got involved in it because the people were great. They were just really great people, and they had some cool technology. At the time, Illumina equipment was really a research-only tool. It wasn't accurate enough to be a diagnostic tool, and we had the belief that it's going to be a great diagnostic platform, and we were right, you know, and the Terra proved it. So you had the NIPT market, the non-invasive prenatal screening, didn't exist 5 years ago. There's now $1 billion in sales in that market. We have $250 million of that. It's going to be a $5 or $10 billion market worldwide as it promulgates out over the next 5 or 10 years. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So we talked about oncology and cancer screening. We talked about the neonatal and the pediatric market. There's going to be drug-drug interactions, so the pharmacogenomics is going to be a huge field, all enabled by, you know, the ever-falling gene sequencing technologies and tools. And so when I'm looking for things, yeah, it's great if it's a big extent market, but I'm more interested in things that are going to open up a new greenfield market that could be big. And I'd rather stub my toe and bet the wrong way on something that doesn't pan out than try to be another Me Too company.
I think some market sizes are challenging to estimate today, and there's
You can't.
the
You
dynamics
can't.
are changing. Companion diagnostics, a lot of folks in our company like to say companion therapeutics, where you can take now a panel and from that go to multiple drugs.
So yeah, I should say market potential, not current
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
It has to
Yeah.
be that.
Yeah.
All right,
And
so-
that's the head bump that I think is
we're done.
interesting.
Yeah, so with that, we're going to close the panel, and I'd like to echo John's comment. Area has tremendous potential to impact care, and as Joe said, be that evangelist that gets the folks sitting here on the panel to put money towards that so they can turn into realities. Thank you.